It's Cardboard Time, episode number 80, and I'm your host, Arwen Kathke. On today's episode, we have reviews of Conquest Princess, Fashion is Power, and Wyrmspan. Now, this is another in the series of a couple of weekly episodes that I will be putting out just to kind of catch up from my travels to Vegas and being busy. I did skip a little bit, so I did want to catch up just a touch. So let's go right into that shelf of shame, and it is at 154. That is up by 2, kind of climbing, and it's getting into some territory that I don't want to get it again. You know, I definitely want to get it below 150 and keep going down instead of up, but we'll see what we can do about that. 3 games incoming this week from crowdfunding. All 3 fit in a nice little box. And that came to me from Weird Giraffe. And those 3 are Way Too Many Cats, Explosion in the Laboratory, and Fire in the Library. And looking forward to playing all 3 of those, as I always am with Weird Giraffe games. And one game that I did get played off the shelf of shame, that was Wyrmspan, and I will be talking about that today. Did get a couple of other games played, but that was the only one off the shelf. Couple of plays of Conquest Princess, Fashion is Power, which I will be talking about today as well. And speaking of which, let's just get right into it and start with Conquest Princess, Fashion is Power. It plays from 1 to 4 players in 40 to 75 minutes, designed by Peter Yang, Seppi Yoon. The art is designed by Mark Eberhard, and it is published by Fight in a Box. A galaxy in peril, the fashion tyrant Mugaga steps up her invasion. The Temporal Intergalactic Armed Response Agency, or TIARA, is our brave new hope. Warriors dress for battle, face off against the worst classic space problems, invaders from space, giant mecha monsters, and the dreaded Mugaga herself. Prepare for battle. Fashion is power. Conquest Princess Fashion is Power is a cooperative 1 to 4 player bag builder board game. A single bag of destiny determines your fate. Manipulate probability to complete your mission. Players take their turn spending action coins on move, shoot, and engage. Moving is just your agents, tiles, or obstacles. Shooting is blasting away with any personal weapons. Engaging is activating special location powers. Each game players must complete their assigned mission before they run out of power, which is also fashion, or the timeline resets. So this was a prototype review copy. Thanks to Seppi Yoon for sending it through me. You know, I did want to get this done. There is a Kickstarter, which I'll talk about at the end of this review. So I want to make sure that it got done in time for the last couple of days of that so you could hear about it. And I think the best way to describe this is what I posted on Blue Sky. And that to me is Conquest Princess by Fight in a Box is what happens when you take a cooperative game, dial the weight up, add some Saturday morning space adventures, and make it decidedly more queer. I absolutely love this theme. You know, the fashion items are great. It is what you're going to go and accessorize with, and that's what's going to give you, depending on whether it's fast fashion or whether it's your regular power-ups, little either one-time bonuses or permanent little boons that you get to use as well. They're kind of borderline ridiculous in the best way possible, especially some of them are fantastic. So I absolutely love the theme. I think that that's great. The cast is all female or non-binary characters, and unfortunately, that caused a lot of hate mail and some negativity online during the first campaign, which is why the second campaign was launched, just to get some eyes on it that maybe didn't see it just due to, you know, the hate that was out there. So this has a really solid production. The bag chits were one thing of note. That is an upgrade. There are cardboard tiles in the regular version of this, but if you do upgrade your copy, everything is made out of acrylic. And this is probably something that I'll wind up doing in my pledge because everything is incredibly satisfying rooting around in that bag for these nice chunky acrylic tiles. And it's something that I always do in my bag building games. Anything that I own, I really do upgrade those tiles, and that is an important part of this game. Also, the player boards being dual layer, everything just kind of slots in nice. A lot of the player boards do wind up being dual layer, and it is very satisfying to play around with those. So from a production standpoint, it's also very solid. The solo is manageable. I played a couple of rounds solo and then a round with Jordan. And I will talk about this in a minute, kind of some of our thoughts on how the game played and how you should teach the game as well. So I found that the game kind of trended more to that upper end of the time estimate and even over it. When Jordan and I were playing, it was definitely over that. Playing solo, I was able to kind of crank through the game in that upper end of 75 minutes a game. But yeah, it's something that you're going to have to invest a little bit of time in. And this is definitely got way more going on than most cooperative games that are out there. So if you're expecting kind of a light, cooperative game, kind of like Pandemic, you're not really going to get that. This is going to be more suited towards your normal game group, your medium to medium heavyweight game group, as opposed to having, your more casual game oriented friends come over, which is kind of interesting given the theme. You look at the theme, and some games do this where they have this very light theme and then there's a very weighty game underneath it, and this is no different. So it is definitely a challenge. It was a lot more weighty than I originally expected it to be, and I think that that's a good thing. I want a big challenge in a solo game or a cooperative game. I want to, maybe not win all the time. I think that is nice. So yeah, that was definitely a challenge. The bag building is really kind of the star here for me. I think mitigating what goes in the bag, what you keep out of the bag, what you put into the bag is really very interesting. So when you go and you take a shot, you pull a tile or multiple tiles, depending on your abilities. You're going to pull those out, and you may wind up drawing misses, and those misses you can keep on your board. It does take an action away from you, but it does take an action from you on the next turn, but it also keeps that miss out of the bag so that when you're drawing from the bag, you have less misses to go through. So I found that very, very interesting, and that was kind of my favorite part of this. The emphasis on sharing special abilities was also very cool. I think you really do have to share those special abilities. Anytime you're in someone's space, you can borrow their powers with their consent, of course, in order to win. That is something that Jordan and I didn't really focus on, and I remembered back to my tutorial with Seppi, and we were doing that all the time, and I think that's one thing that we really didn't do during our two-player time with it. So speaking of that tutorial, so I kind of wanted to talk about the teach on this because for me, I had an interesting case where I was taught by Seppi at PAX U, which I kind of suffered from Designer in a Box. I had everything kind of laid out for me. Seppi told me, okay, this is what you want to do. What do you think we need to do here? Kind of working through that tutorial. And it was very easy. I was able to grasp it real easy. I figured, okay, there's no problem. I've played this before. I can just teach Jordan. So I had Jordan come over once my review copy came in and started going through the rule book, and we skipped the tutorial because I'm like, I've played this before, not a problem. And it was very tough to do that with just the rule book and skipping everything. You want to play the tutorial session in this game. Anytime you introduce it to somebody else, to me, the best way to teach them is through this tutorial. Because if you don't and you just go through the rules, it is very tough to grasp. And going through the rules, as is, I had a lot of edge cases. I was like, what do I do? This covers pretty much everything. There were a couple of layout, things I was still kind of confused on, but, through rereading the rules, I kind of figured out what I was supposed to do and what the intent was. So once I redid that tutorial, I played it solo and then, played a couple more rounds after that. It was much easier and it was much smoother. So don't skip it. Whatever you do in this game, don't skip that tutorial. From a color vision perspective, I thought it was pretty well done. A couple of the dice were a little bit close in color for me, but I was able to manage them pretty well. There may be some issues for others when it comes to differing color vision impairments, depending on what you're afflicted with. If you do have a color vision impairment, that may be something that you want to consider, just taking a look at those dice and seeing if that's going to be an issue for you. It wasn't for me. And then the rest was absolutely fine for me. I was able to see the different characters were all different shapes, and I had my player boards in front of me, which I didn't have a problem with either. So pretty easy to distinguish as well. So overall, my final thoughts on this, I had backed this during the first campaign on the advice from my friend Kim Breeze of Tabletop Rebellion, and trying to counteract the negativity that they got during the first campaign, I said, you know what, I'm going to invest in this. It's a great version of, female and non-binary representation. It's what we need in the hobby. It's everything that I kind of espouse. So, it's right up my alley when it comes to that. And it's very queer. The fashion is just so wonderfully queer, and I love it. There is a second Kickstarter campaign for the expansion, like I mentioned, that is going on right now. As of this recording, it ends in a couple of days. You can also get the base game. You can get all the upgrades and whatnot. So if you're looking for a complex cooperative game that you can get out with a group who likes those medium weight experiences, this might be worth checking out for you. If you look at the theme, you love the theme, and you're okay with the weight, I think this is going to be a great game when it comes out. Lots of replayability, some good scenarios that vary things up enough that I think it's going to be worth the investment. That is Conquest Princess, Fashion is Power. The other game that I wanted to talk about today is the new hotness that everybody is talking about. That is Wyrmspan. People are getting it to their door. They're playing it. And there's some mixed thoughts, and I wanted to chime in with mine. Wyrmspan plays from 1 to 5 players in 90 minutes, designed by Connie Vogelman. The art is by Clementine Kemperdow, and published by Stonemaier Games. In Wyrmspan, you are an amateur dracologist in the world of Wyrmspan, a place where dragons of all shapes, sizes, and colors roam the skies. Excavate a hidden labyrinth you recently unearthed on your land and entice these beautiful creatures to roost in the sanctuary of your caves. During a game of Wyrmspan, you will build a sanctuary for dragons of all shapes and sizes. Your sanctuary begins with 3 excavated spaces: the leftmost space in your Crimson Cavern, your Golden Grotto, and your Amethyst Abyss. Over the course of the game, you will excavate additional spaces in your sanctuary and entice dragons to live there, chaining together powerful abilities and earning the favor of the Dragon Guild. Wyrmspan is inspired by the mechanisms of Wingspan, though its unique elements make Wyrmspan a standalone game that is not compatible with Wingspan. So big thanks to Jordan for picking this up for me. I wasn't sure if I was going to get this. When it was first announced, I was very happy over the theme, but I was like, do I need another version of Wingspan? Allie did mention it. She seemed interested in it, and I've grown to enjoy Wingspan quite a bit, despite if you go back to my initial episodes, I was like, I hate Wingspan. Wingspan's overrated, and I like it. I think I've come to appreciate it as a game. I appreciate what it's done for the hobby, certainly. And yeah, I definitely have a different opinion of it now, 3 years later than I initially did during those first couple of plays of it. So overall, I definitely feel that there's enough different in this version, with Wyrmspan kind of being the more complex of the two. There were comparisons of, well, it's just a reskinned Wingspan, and I'm like, no, it's definitely not. There's mechanisms in there, there's familiarity in there. You're going to be able to use some of the things that you learned in Wingspan. They're going to be familiar, but this definitely is its own game. I love the artwork. The dragon artwork on this game is fantastic. And the one nitpick on the artwork that I do have, I did have to kind of reread through the instruction book. I looked at the excavation cards, and the excavation cards had all these... The initial 3 looked like they kind of fit into my Crimson Cavern, but the artwork doesn't matter on those excavation cards. You can put them anywhere, which just seems kind of weird. I thought you had to match it with the artwork, matching what area you were putting it in. And yeah, it took me a little bit to kind of realize, oh yeah, that's not something I have to do. It's just artwork for the sake of artwork and clearing out that portion of that cavern. So a little bit of confusion there, but after I got past that, it was fine. The guild board is really what I found the most interesting in the new version. So there is a guild board that is, you're going to be going around a rondel, and as you pass these spaces, you're going to be picking up these little bonuses. In addition, 2 times per circle on that rondel, you are going to hit a space that you're going to be able to place down one of your cubes for up to 4 cubes. That will give you either a point bonus or some sort of ability. And those can be switched out depending on how you want to play. You can either go and pick one to begin with, or you can randomly pick one. And, the guild board does kind of switch things up quite a bit depending on what guild that you pick. Getting some of those special abilities can really, really help you out. And the right timing of when to actually move on it. As you progress, you're going to get moves on this rondel. It can lead to some very powerful moves, that you're going to be able to play on your board because of the resources or the bonuses that you're going to be able to get through this. So that, to me, was the most interesting thing on this new game. The turn structure felt different than Wingspan. Players get 6 coins to spend between actions. And, you place some higher powered cards. Those also require coins. So that's going to essentially cost you a turn that you might have otherwise had. You do have the ability to potentially earn more, though, by doing certain things. So you excavate or, place down certain dragons. They will give you more coins. You move around on the guild board. That also can get you coins as well. So I thought that the turn structure was kind of interesting, not kind of tapering off like Wingspan did, where you had that typical turn structure with the first round having more than the last round, although the last round you have way more to do than your first round. The action structure did feel radically different. I did miss my normal, you perform the action and you activate all the birds in that corresponding action row. That was really the most satisfying part of Wingspan for me. And when I saw that I wasn't doing that, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. And I think that the exploring made up for that. So exploring is kind of like the reverse of what you were doing when you were going through the bonuses in Wingspan, but you took an entire turn to do it. So you started in Wingspan, you went from right to left. In this, you go from left to right, and you move your explorer on different spaces. Your first space is always going to give you something. And then as you put dragons down, those dragons might have bonuses for landing on them. And then between every dragon, you're going to get a bonus until you don't have any dragons anymore, and then you stop. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Once I got the hang of how to better utilize it, time it, when to put things down, when to, put a dragon down before I explored, etc. That to me, it became better. I was able to better utilize it. I think this will take a couple of games actually to really appreciate the possibilities with what cards are available for gamers to get into the swing of things. So once you kind of see what's available, you see the different powers, you see the types of powers that happen, you can kind of get a better feel. And it's going to take a couple of games. There's a lot of cards there, just like Wyrmspan, that you're going to have to go through. And once I got kind of late into that second game, I knew what I was looking for, what the potential might be. And I do think that, somebody with a couple of plays under their belt is massively got some advantage over somebody who hasn't played this and is playing for the first time, potentially. So something to keep in mind as well. Excavating was interesting, so that clearing out of the spaces to place dragons, you start, like I said in the description, with your first space empty, and then you clear out those other spaces to place dragons. Every single time you do excavate, you get another little bonus. It was interesting. I didn't find it super interesting. The only time that I felt like it was amazingly interesting was when I was able to duplicate a place power that I got from one of my dragons that gave me 2 coins. So I was able to place, this excavation card down, and then that duplicated what I was doing. So I got 2 coins in addition to the 2 coins that I had gotten for placing the dragon down in the first place. So I was able to get a lot of turns, that round, which was really, really cool, really satisfying. And you love to see those little satisfying moments, and you're definitely getting those. But again, it might take you a game or two to kind of get to that point where you're really starting to chain things together in an interesting way and seeing those, potential possibilities. The Atoma was straightforward. It was very easy to manage, not hard at all. I think I learned it in about 10 minutes through the rulebook, and it didn't get in the way of play. My second solo game got done in about an hour or so. So once I had kind of gone through all those nuances, it was very much, quick to go. Almost like I've gotten to when I play solo games of Wyrmspan, I know exactly what to do, and I just, kind of go through it and I'm done. I ultimately think this is going to be a game that's more suited towards a lower player count. I'd say 3 or less. I could see a 5-player game of it definitely overstaying its welcome just due to the turn structure and due to how it kind of operates. I do think that this is going to be a game that doesn't play well at 5, maybe 4. I would be interested to play, with maybe a group that does move along pretty quickly. But if you have a lot of AP in your group and you do have a 5-player group, this might not be one that you want to get out with everybody that's there. Maybe take a little subsection of 2 people and play it first. When it comes to color vision, I did have some issues. The purple and blue are extremely close, as well as the green and red components. Like I said, I did have some issues with them, separating them. I was able to see well enough to get them separated, but I would probably have issues if I were to use them in a game. Fortunately, I was able to use the yellow and blue combo with no issues. I'm not sure I'm going to find the need to modify them with a full player complement or not. Once I get a full player complement, I will be able to figure that out. But not being able to see it on the board and see it play out, I'm not quite sure yet. So my final thoughts for this game, this definitely is a game that has the feel of the core of Wyrmspan, but Connie was able to bring some pretty interesting new mechanics to the table with it, as well as make it feel different enough to be notable and stand on its own. So this will be sticking around in my collection. I would highly recommend, if you are on the fence, that you try it before you buy it, just to see what it's like and see if, especially you have Wyrmspan, if you do need this game. I felt that it was different enough, but I do feel like there's going to be some people that say this is close enough to Wyrmspan that I don't necessarily need this. So definitely try it, but don't let that comparison of this is just a re-skinned Wyrmspan hold you back from trying this. I think that would be a travesty. I think you need the play of this game to really determine that for yourself. So might not be your jam, but it also might surprise you. You never know. So that was Wyrmspan. And I think that's going to be it for today. I'm hoping that I will have a special guest on next episode. That's kind of what I'm planning for, but we will see if that happens. If you want to know more information about Cardboard Time, you can go to cardboardtime.com. Our Instagram and Twitter are at cardboard_time, and my Blue Sky is at Cardboard Time. The Discord on the Tabletop Express server is a lovely, lovely community where we chat. Everybody over there is wonderful and very friendly, and it is an outstanding community that I'm very happy to be a part of. If you do want an invite, you can just hit me up with an email. And speaking of that, my email is cardboardtime@gmail.com, where you can also email me with questions, suggestions, or ideas for discussion topics. So as always, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you around the table next week for another episode of Cardboard Time.